All right, there we go. We have Jason McLean back on video.
Yeah. No, unfortunately, since our last time, my hard drive crashed, so I had to have it completely put in. Got a better hard drive, so I mean that's a good thing. But it was weird because my laptop died at the same time my wife's laptop died. Both crashed. So I'm thinking, okay, we got a bug in there somewhere. But the tech guy was like, no, hers was old and yours just apparently had a defect. But they both died within like 2 days of each other.
The bug in there wouldn't happen to be the NSA, would it?
I'm thinking Russians, Russians? But who knows?
Well, they're hacking into everything. Why not hack into your hard drive, man? I guess I better do a search of my hard drive here and see if I got some rescues in there.
Yep. Well, it's entirely Cyrillic language, so it should show up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I saw a file pop in my Finder, and it said Hillary. So I don't know. I don't think I put that in there.
If I were you, I'd be watching out over your shoulder. What happens to those people who have a little too much on Hillary?
They get on a list.
Hey, you know what? My lips are sealed.
All right.
I don't end up in the middle of Fort Morrissey Park.
Oh, man, you went right there, did you?
Oh yeah.
Well, Jason, welcome back to the program. We had a great chat with you last time. We said that even then we had to have you back, and man, you just presented a lot of these esoteric subjects like Bigfoot and UFOs in a completely different way. This interesting title for yourself, Biblical Paranormal Research. So let me ask you, when you're looking at paranormal, and there's a lot of subtopics with that, but do you always sort of, look at like maybe a Bible foundation, like scripture foundation, and then go look for stuff and see if it measures to that, or do you apply the Bible to? How do you do that?
You know what? That's an excellent question. Basically, what I do is I try and look at the phenomena around us, right, objectively as you can. And a lot of these things are very subjective because we don't have a way of actually measuring things. Like, how do you measure, something you can't see, right? So you take the stories, you take the accounts, you take all of it, and then you basically start lining up. Where do things overlap, right, within the stories themselves? Mm-hmm. Where do you see the repetition? Where do you see the commonalities? And then you start trying to create a framework from just what people have seen, right? You have to sort of work with the objective stuff first. Then you see then you take that to the scripture and say, how does that line up? But then you kind of have to go a little bit deeper because the Protestants, we only have 66 books in our Bible. We omit the Septuagint, and we omit the Book of Enoch and the Book of Jubilees. So that leaves a lot of material open that we don't usually consider, and yet all of that material is referenced in our 66 books, specifically the Book of Enoch. That's it's either quoted or alluded to 11 times directly by the different authors. Jesus gets his name, the Son of Man, from that book. So there's just a lot of material that they were, Paul, I would argue, makes a lot more sense once you've read the Book of Enoch. When you understand that the Second Temple, the Second Temple era had a lot of material around the Book of Enoch and what it was teaching. So once you kind of get into some of these other literatures, you can start building that framework. So I guess the simpler answer to your question is I look at the phenomena first, measure it, sort of create a format, and then say, how does this fit with the larger themes of the Bible? Mm-hmm. And then, like I said, it's mostly just compare and contrast.
One of the things that always kind of pissed me off is that when you talk about the 66 books, there was it the Council of Trent or somewhere where they had a group of people standing around saying, okay, this book's okay, and because you mentioned the Book of Enoch, well, evidently the Book of Enoch's not okay. It didn't get included in there. But, was that decision for which book remained, was that a spiritual decision? Did God, sort of Holy Spirit or any kind of thing, or was that just their opinion? Well, I don't like this and I don't like that.
Okay, this is a topic that I would like to read a little bit more up on because I have a very general, broad swath on it, and I think this is probably an entire show into itself. Like, how do we get the Bible? It's a lot more complicated than that as far as how the books got into where they were. But I will say this. I believe fundamentally that God is in control of everything. So I have to assume, even when people talk, well, these mistakes because these notes got in from a scribe. I'm of the opinion those scribal notes, they aren't errors. They were intended to be there. They were worked in because they give us additional information that we wouldn't know otherwise. However, as far as why the Book of Enoch was omitted from, say, the Catholic texts, I would argue it's because I think that was a scriptural thing or a spiritual thing. I think God, who is in control of all things, removed that from our consciousness to get where we have to be. But now is the time where he's raising people back up, so he's bringing these texts back to us. A very quick sort of overview is the reason the books that we call the apocryphal books became apocryphal was when I just forgot Jerome. Saint Jerome went down to do his translation into the Vulgate Latin, which is the common language at the time. That's sort of the irony. Is he was doing it so everyone could read the Bible, and then a couple hundred years later, the Catholic Church won't allow it to be translated into any other languages. It had to be in Latin, and that wasn't the language anyone spoke anymore. And his entire point was to get the Bible to the people. But he fell in with a group of ultra-Orthodox Jews who did not believe that the extra books that you see in the Septuagint were actually canon. They didn't accept them. So he said, well, since the Old Testament's for the Jews and the New Testament's for us, I'm going to go with what they said. But then he realized, however, the Septuagint is quoted, contrary to what you've been told, the Septuagint is quoted by Jesus and the apostles in their writings and in the words of Jesus. Very specifically, the Our Father prayer, the ending, and you can even argue that the format of it is based on a prayer that comes out of the Septuagint. When he talks about gathering the chickens like a hen under his wings, that comes from Second Esdras, I believe. I'd have to double check that reference, but it comes from one of the 4 different Esdras which is basically just Ezra, that exists. So I mean, there are quotes in there, and there's a lot of misinformation around there. And so again, specifically, that's a topic for another day. But I think the reason we're getting back to it, people are starting to dig more into it. Like, how do we get it? What does it mean? I think it's because Christians now the Spirit is bringing us back home, right? To start looking at things far more deeply than perhaps we've been doing in the past, right? It's been enough for people to say, well, just the Bible said it or my preacher said it and we're done. Well, no, that's not spiritual maturity. That's not what Paul said to have. Paul called us to be mature, which means getting in there and confronting some difficult issues that we see in both the text and in its teachings, and we have to be face-to-face with that. But to do that, we kind of have to be bigger. We have to really take that next step in both our physical and our spiritual education.
Well, like I said, I just have a little problem with men making that decision. It didn't seem like it was spiritual to me. It seemed like to me they took a vote, and then, like you said, there was a time when the Catholics would chain the Bible to the altar, and I think you mentioned they would have it in Latin, and so they didn't want it. And when it was translated into English, you went and burned the guy, and then they dug him up later and burned him again.
Burned him again, yeah. That's when you pissed somebody off. When they're digging you up to burn you a second time. I'm hoping for that one. I don't know that's going to happen though.
Whew,
I don't think I can make it. I can make people pretty mad, but I don't know how I'll make people that mad.
Yeah, when they dig you up and burn you again, man. I mean, they were so mad, and it's like, man, I don't know if I wanted them guys making that decision what books to read and such. But I'm wondering. There's that one scripture says that was it an angel or somebody told Daniel to seal the things up in the book. I'm wondering if maybe just the kind of reintroduction to people of the Book of Enoch and others, I mean, Book of Giants and Jasher and all these are part of that sort of release the word more in the end.
Right. Well, I don't disagree. I will say the Book of Jasher, and I've read it. I have. That one's not the Book of Jasher that was referenced in the Old Testament. It comes from the Book of Jasher that we have is a fake that was made about the Middle Ages in Spain, and we can do that linguistically. We can track it down with the words that are used. However, it is a compilation of myth, right? Like it was a bunch of Jewish rabbis were coming together. They were creating a text that it was a compilation of their myths. To put out, basically, it was designed to be a hoax. But if you get into it, though, when you realize that they're putting together a bunch of stuff that's just that was their oral traditions, There's some interesting tidbits in there that I referenced in some of my work on prophecy and even on the Nephilim. We can talk about that a little bit more later.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I think a lot of these books are coming, but I don't think it's what was. I think it's part of the prophecy, which is that knowledge will increase at the end. I do think it's part of that. But if you ask me specifically what was sealed up, I think it's the Book of Revelation. It is my personal opinion that the Book of Revelation and the Book of Daniel are the same book by two different authors from two different positions. And the reason I say that is twofold. One, when at the end, Daniel, and I can pull it up if we need to, is looking at this large angel, which is Michael, right? He puts his hand up to the sky. He says, it's time, and half a time. And he goes on a little bit. He describes about seeing two men in white linen, right? So you have this giant angel, and then you have these two other men in white linen. They don't seem to do anything or say anything. They're just mentioned. And then the book ends, right? He's told to seal up these prophecies. Flash forward to the Book of Revelation. John is being led by an angel, and he comes to a mighty angel who has his hand on the sea and the land, who raises his hand to the sky and says, time shall be no more. It's the same event. Daniel is watching John and and the angel that's guiding him deal with Michael when he's given the book and he's been told to prophesy. Daniel's watching that event. And here's where it gets a little trippy. That means every time John heard that scripture read from the book of Daniel, it was about him.
Wow.
And he never knew it. So
Wow.
So that actually connects those two books directly. They're saying, hey, this is a handoff here. This is literally like a relay. But the second thing is, when you look at the prophecies in the book of Daniel, particularly when it comes to the nations, which are the animals, those animals are all repeated in the book of Revelation. Why? Because Daniel is giving you what the prophetic meaning of each thing is, whether it's a mountain or if it's a mountain or the animals. He tells you what it is. Sorry, choking on air apparently. But then you jump ahead to Revelation, and they go without interpretation. Why? Because Daniel's already told you. You don't need it. All you have to do is go back and forth and say, hey, what's going on? Well, why we have this weird chimera? It has the mouth of the lion and the body of a leopard. What's it saying? It's saying that it's a map. It's Britain is the mouth because its symbol is the lion. You go back to Daniel. You have a lion with eagle's wings. The eagle's wings ripped off, and it has the mouth and mind of a man. It's Daniel 7:4. Britain, its symbol is a lion. Always has been. The United States, whose symbol is the eagle, was removed when? July 4th, 7/4. You even look at the flag of the British flag. Again, it says the lion stands on two legs. The lion stands on two legs on the British flags. The bear, it has three ribs in it. Well, is there a nation whose official symbol is the bear? Yes, Russia, under Putin. Look up the flag right now. Under Putin's symbol for his party is the bear. And of course, we've always called Russia the bear. Go all the way back to to Reagan. The four-headed leopard. That is the Alexandrian Empire after it had broken up and reformed. Remember, Alexander the Great's empire, which was the entire Middle East all the way to India, right, and North Africa, it breaks apart into four nations, or into four kingdoms, right? Well, where all those nations, all of them, are Muslim right now. But at the end, that caliphate's going to reform, so you're going to have all four of these separate nations come back into one body. That's why they have four heads. So it's all coming back together. Then, of course, we jump up to Revelation. They're all one. Why? Because they're one political body. So you have so England has joined with this caliphate, and the Russian bear, again, it only has the hands of the bear. Now that may be that it's because the bear has some sort of non-aggression treaty with them, and so it's technically sort of protecting them, or maybe it's because Russia is supplying the Middle East with arms. Russia has been the largest supplier of weapons to the Middle East forever. Because they like to build that relationship.
Well, the creature with four heads to give the Muslims a lot of work to do there, cutting them heads off there. But let me ask you, who was that? Was that a prophet or was that Nebuchadnezzar? Who was it that was cast out and they, I think they were cursed and they got like nails and hair was growing on them. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah, that was Nebuchadnezzar.
That was
Yes.
Nebuchadnezzar. Was that the first werewolf?
No, I think he honestly just lost his mind. I mean, that was his punishment. It wasn't that he became anything. He just went crazy. Now there is.
Oh, I was hoping you'd go
as
with
far
me on
as-
that.
I know what you want, but I have to only speak. I can only say the truth and move on. But what I can say is this: Daniel. It talks about Daniel's men. I forget where it is. I had it referenced one time, but it talks about the lion men of Moab.
Ooh.
Here's where it gets weird. I have looked. I can't find any references to that being a title. Like, oh, it's like some sort of honorary guard, and that's what they were saying is these lion, the lion men are just, it was some sort of honorary. No, there's nothing. What you can find are statues of lion-headed people all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we always think of, oh, the Egyptians, they had their gods. Well, those are fanciful things, right? Mm-hmm. No, there are statues of people of human beings with animal heads all over the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And we have accounts of weird things to this day, and this is where it all sort of comes full circle, all over the place. People looking at satyrs here in modern day. There are people say, yeah, they had the head and body of a person, but then it had donkey legs. I mean, a dog man.
So do you think that those chimeras, those hybrids, like the centaur and various things, existed? And even in Egypt, I don't know how many cat heads they get. I mean, they're really.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think a lot of what we see in Egypt, as far as and in most mythologies, where you have these half-human things, I would argue, particularly when they're gods,
mm-hmm.
I think what we're seeing is sort of memories of the Watchers from Genesis 6
mm-hmm.
and the Book of Enoch. They came down. They had to take physical form.
Mm-hmm.
I think many of them either appeared. If they didn't appear as human when they were physical, then when they were in their supernatural bodies, they appeared as having animal faces and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's where a lot of that is coming from, is that supernatural.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think there's a lot of let me rephrase this, until otherwise, I think a lot of the bizarre physical creatures we see are supernatural. Now, that doesn't mean they're not physical. This is where things get really complicated, because we like to say, if it's material or if it's supernatural, and there's two different things. No, something that's supernatural can be physical. That's not exclusive. It's just, and I would even argue, if they're going to manifest in our world, they have to be physical somehow, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're just now manifesting here.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where a lot of my Bigfoot friends get angry, because, hey, I mean, Bigfoot is weird. I mean, weirder than you think. There are plenty of accounts of people tracking Bigfoot. Well, that's Godzilla.
Oh, how about that one?
That's Bigfoot. Hey, go back to Godzilla. It's Godzilla fighting a Jaeger. How can you not like that? There you go. But yeah, no. Like, people will talk about tracking Bigfoot in the snow, 2 feet deep, and they'll track these things for a mile into the middle of the field, and they stop. They'll set up camera traps. My favorite story, and again, finding Bigfoot had this happen several times. They'll put up, camera, and they're like, oh, something went wrong with our camera trap, and we didn't record anything. You're telling me that y'all, with this camera crew, can't set up one camera trap? And it happens several times. A friend, an individual that I know, I won't give his name because I don't know how far he wants on this report. I've talked about this before. They set up 2 camera traps on either side of a creek, right? They knew animals were crossing there. Very thin, very easy to cross.
Okay.
Both cameras, so they can catch them coming and going, fire off simultaneously. They get deer, they get raccoons, all the furry little critters of the world going through, right? They're firing off at the same time. So everything's fine. And then they have one photo that's white on both cameras. And of course they did have Sasquatch footprints. The creature passed, but instead of taking pictures of the Sasquatch, they both went white. And he is not the first person to tell me this. Apparently camera traps and other cameras do go funky around these things. Now, does it happen all the time? No. but does happen sometimes. That tells me there's something else happening here. Melba Ketchum, again, how I'll let you decide how you want to do it, but how you view her work. But she's telling us, hey, human mitochondrial DNA, and then some unknown novel hominid DNA. I mean, DNA we're completely unfamiliar with. That tells me these things may have a very high chance of being demonic in nature, or some, if they aren't Nephilim truly, then they may be some sort of subset, right?
Yeah.
Because we see both, we see the Nephilim, particularly in the Book of Giants, doing weird stuff with animals. I mean, and I'll leave it right
Okay.
there. But it's like it talks about how they're
Hopefully not too weird.
Well, and let's just say it's whatever Californians do with animals.
Oh.
Whatever they're out there doing, creates these monsters. Well, yeah, I did. What what would you say about what would you call Bigfoots? 12-foot. Some of them, I've heard of them as being as tall as 14 foot, running around, covered in fur, but their body proportions aren't human. They're very chimp-like as far as proportion of knees, leg width, arm width, or length. It's very chimpanzee-like.
Yeah, hang on for a second. Mexico Unexplained. I know you're watching. Are you in California? And the question is, are they doing weird stuff with animals out in California? All right, and speaking of that, we have a couple questions for you, Jason. Here's one from Felix out of the YouTube chat. It says, Jason, is Bigfoot a demonic being or an entity?
Well, we kind of touched on it. At this point, we don't have enough information to say yes or no, but what I can say is this. There's enough high weirdness around them for me to say that they may still be material creatures, right? They're not a pure demon, which is entirely a supernatural or entirely spiritual creature. But at this point, I have to say that it's definitely supernatural. They do seem to be telepathic. I've had too many accounts of people telling me I was able, they talk to me, and they can't all be crazy. Most of them can be crazy, but not all of them. Again, we have things where wherever we have Bigfoots, we have orbs, we have UFOs. People have seen them getting off of UFOs. Again, they're disappearing in the middle of the fields. Like the tracks just stop. It's like that happens too often for me to say, oh, everything's fine. Right? I mean, just personally, when I start putting all this together, I'm like, that's too much evidence to say definitively that they're purely physical relic animals. So I think there's absolutely a demonic aspect to them. They are clearly supernatural, but I do think they are absolutely material. Like, they do eat. They are physical creatures, but I think from time to time they're taken out of our world because I think they are they have some role to play.
Well, I mean, when you talk about that one letter thing, LGBT, there's a bunch of them, and I think there's an A on the end of that. So I'm wondering if that's not stand for animals there.
Well, and the last one I heard was it was LBGTQ, and then there were two other letters that they gave to him. I'm trying to remember what they were. But it went after queer. It was because now it was originally questioning. Now then it went to queer, and I don't know how that's supposed to be different from gay.
Yeah.
But it's like they keep adding these letters onto it, and you're like, whoa, can we pick something here? Like, there's a certain point where you're just creating crap out of nothing.
Yeah. No, man.
Now they're even like there was one that's even a plus sign where they're just like they just gave up.
Yeah, I know last week they added SF. I think it stands for sick freak. Now Dreamwalker out of YouTube says, could Bigfoot be a guy in a costume walking around?
Then that is the busiest person I have ever seen in my life. Because what he's doing
everywhere.
is he's putting on a more advanced costume than any Hollywood production has ever created. He's creating hundreds of different feet of different sizes, doing this all out in the middle of nowhere, and apparently bringing along a couple of friends from time to time,
right?
In the hopes that people randomly walk by. So that's my problem, right? It's like one person. Here's the thing, right? Most fakes are pretty easy to spot. Like they're just too easy. And again, this is where it's like you have people who are like, you have there was a bow hunter I listened to a couple of years ago. He was in a tree. And he was waiting, right? He had climbed it. He wasn't using a stand. So he's in the tree and he's waiting, and all of a sudden he starts hearing this chatter he turns around, and he's being very quiet because he doesn't want to spook anything. But he starts hearing this chatter. He sees a couple of people coming up. He looks over. It's a couple of Bigfoot, but they're on all fours,
Whoa.
and they're talking back and forth. And they crawl up, and they're just walking underneath him. And he doesn't make a sound, and they apparently never notice him. And they keep on going by, seemingly chattering at each other. Again, who knew he was there? He's in the middle of nowhere, and he can hear them chattering back and forth. Which is, again, we hear Bigfoot having a language all the time. There's a gentleman whose name I can't remember off the top of my head, but he was a police officer, and he focused on like crime scene material. He made a study of several dozen prints taken from Ohio, right, of Bigfoot, and some of them are clear enough to actually have like fingerprints, the dermal ridges in them. He did all of them, and he noticed two things. One, the number of small footprints and large footprints fell within a bell curve, meaning you had a bunch of the smaller and medium-sized ones and just a few of the big ones. He's like, that's what you'd expect to find in a living population of animals, right? You're gonna have a lot more children and juveniles than you have the big adults. Secondly, of the ones where they had dermal ridges, they all ran the same direction, meaning that they ran a direction different from humans or apes. It was something in between. So, and he was even noticing some of them were the same individual, because there would be a scar pattern that would be appearing on several of these tracks. So, if there's one guy or even a group of people running around trying to create this myth of Bigfoot, I'm going to be honest, it would be the most well-funded, quietest hoax ever done, because they're creating dozens of different suits, dozens of different tracks, and we're apparently doing this all day, every day, in order for the hopes that somebody randomly comes across and tells a story.
I mean, it sounds to me like, man, when the two Bigfoots were on all fours, maybe they were hoping for Pete Buttigieg to come walking by too. So you got to watch out for that. Overbuilt Automotives out of the YouTube says, do you think Dogman is both real critters and a shapeshifter?
Right, like a skinwalker.
Yeah.
Dogman, I think, probably is more supernatural in the fact that he may be more immaterial than, say, Bigfoot. Only because of some of the associations that they've had. I've heard people seeing them disappear, things like that. Anytime I have something appearing and disappearing, I'm thinking non-material. However, there does seem to be different classifications of Dogman, in the same way there are different types of Bigfoot. So it may be that what we're seeing is, instead of there being like one species, what you have are multiple species at different, and maybe it's one species at different stages of development, or multiple species, and some are natural, some are supernatural. Like maybe there is a Bigfoot out there, it is a relic animal, but then you have this other thing that's been spliced demonically. Again, at this point, we just don't have enough actual hard evidence to say one way or the other. And here's the thing: I've got dozens of footprints for Bigfoot that you can pull up, and you can see dermal ridges. You got photos. Dogman's a little bit sketchier, and again, I haven't gone. If there are prints of Dogman, I haven't gone into enough to see.
Yeah.
But enough of what I've heard about it makes me think it is more supernatural. But again, that doesn't mean it's not material.
Chuck and Grandma from their condo out west says, have you ever seen the video from Yellowstone with 4 or 5, I guess, Bigfoots walking through the snow, covering a large distance behind the bison?
Yes. Yeah, I know the video that you're referring to. And again, there's a lot of videos out there that are very intriguing. The problem is, at this point, all they do is show us that these things are real, right? That they have populations.
Jason,
and there are some interesting clues. Like there's one that came out of New York where you don't even really see the adult, but it's like you can see the infant climb up into the trees and starts brachiating. Well, that actually brachiating. You see it with gibbons, where it's the hand over hand, going from limb to limb like this. It's called brachiating. You see that a lot, or you see this once, and that answers some questions, because there's a cryptid that I forget the name of it off the top of my head. It isn't very popular, but it was described as these small monkey-like things up north, and that would throw wood and rocks and things at loggers, and it came up around the turn of the last century. And it's not very popular, but they describe them as these small monkey things that would throw rocks and branches and
You
things at
mean you
loggers.
think they sort of look like the flying monkeys on Wizard of Oz?
Maybe, but missing the wings. I think what we're actually seeing there are juvenile or infant Sasquatches, right? The Sasquatch parents come, they leave them in nests, and they climb up the trees because they're small enough, they're light enough. They climb the trees, they hang out there where it's safe, while the parents go off to forage for food, and they come back, get them, and they go back to their home, so the mothers can be more mobile. And it's like we had Sasquatch, and we had these other things over here, and these other things over there. I think maybe it was called the Agagwe. I may be wrong on that. I haven't read it in like 20 years.
Okay.
But it's like I put two and two together, and I'm like, well, hold on. What you have is a video explaining these things, right? So instead of having multiple cryptids, what we have is one cryptid and an infant version of the same cryptid, just having two different behaviors because of their age. And it's a concept that would match. What do apes do? They throw rocks and trees and branches to get people to go away. That's what an infant would do. It seems to be, mimicking what Sasquatch does to get rid of people. So it all seems to fit.
Don Morgan from our YouTube chat asked this question here. Says, do you believe that the most full body sightings come from people who are Native Americans?
You know what? I don't have enough numbers to say yes or no on that. I mean, there are sightings everywhere from everybody, right?
It's in their culture too, though, isn't it?
It is, and I think it's because and you go back. I mean, you don't even have to go back very far, where you would have tales of American Indians saying, "Hey, we know who these things are. We used to, our kids would play together. Like literally, the Sasquatch infants would play with human infants from the indigenous tribes." And I think there may be several reasons for that. And in fact, one of my favorite stories, going back to my days when I was in Nacogdoches in archaeology, we found these X formations, right? And I asked one of the locals, it's like, hey, what are these weird tree formations out here? And she told me, it's like, hey, that's left by the Stick Indians. And I'm thinking, okay, it must be a local name for the Caddo that live out there.
Wow. It
wasn't until years later that I found out that Stick Indian was the Caddo name for Bigfoot. And when the white men originally came in and were driving the Caddo out of their traditional homes, they said, you can get rid of us, but the Stick Indian, he's going to stay and he's going to fight for his land. And so it's the same thing. And now, as far as why they were probably a lot more connected to the American Indians than the white people who are showing up, I got to call a spade here. If they are demonically influenced, then it actually makes a lot more sense. I still think they're even whether they're supernatural or not, they're still material. And if there is a supernatural influence, we have to remember the American Indians were native. They were pagans. They were not doing. Many of them were not doing very nice things to one another in the name of their religion. They were still, worshiping false gods, false idols. It would not, of course, if these things are demonic in some form, it would make it very easy for them to be very well connected to them and feel at home with them without having to feel threatened. But the white men come in, they bring Christianity, they bring Jesus. They're not going to be as common or nice around us because we pose a supernatural threat to them.
What do they describe orbs as UFOs a lot of times? And I know you've seen videos like probably everybody else has with in the sky. They're 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10, and then they move around. And sometimes they look like giant orbs. Those don't look like spaceships. And if they are they playing a game of chase and tag? I mean, that doesn't even seem like a UFO. Why do they describe them as UFOs?
Well, here's the thing. There was a photo that MUFON put out a couple years ago, and I wish I could find it. I'll have to dig it up. It looks like this weird triangular thing in the sky, right? But imagine here's the best way to imagine it: a manta ray in the like flapping in the sky, but it's multicolored, like it's shimmering. Well, there's a little blur behind it, and there's a little blur in front of it, and I realized very quickly that what they were calling a UFO was actually a pterodactyl, right? We'll come back to it in a little bit. My point being, all UFO means is they don't know what it is and it's flying, right?
Right.
So it is technically a UFO. In fact, that's why honestly, I think that's why the military is changing it to UFP,
Hmm.
unidentified flying or UAP,
Hmm.
unidentified aerial phenomena, because it is something you don't know what it is.
Hmm.
So these orbs, I would argue, are probably angels, and if they are angels in a craft, it's still a supernatural thing, right? What we're
Hmm.
seeing is we're not seeing a metallic object that's flying around using engines. It's a supernatural thing. Maybe it's angels in their primary form, like their non-manifesting form to communicate with us. It's just them because they're four-dimensional beings. What does that look like? I don't know. Maybe they're orbs because that's just the simplest form for them to take and move in our atmosphere.
Hmm.
Maybe it is some sort of supernatural craft. But my
Hmm.
point being is, I don't think it's material. These are energy-based things, and that's why they're orbs and they're moving. And there's a woodblock print from the 1500s over Nuremberg, where you have what looks like pillars, just these tubes and these spheres fighting one another. And they went on. The battle went on for several hours over Nuremberg, and they made this wood carving out of it. Go back to the book of Exodus, right? You go to the Hebrew when you have the pillar of fire by day, pillar of smoke. I'm sorry, pillar of fire by night, and the pillar of smoke by day. Sorry, dyslexia is kicking in. You get into the Hebrew, it literally says a pillar or a cylindrical object emitting fire or emitting smoke. So I think a lot of what we're seeing with that aren't craft in a material sense. They may be craft in a supernatural sense, but we're dealing with things of energy, right? These are
Hmm.
energy beings. Maybe they're an energy craft, but they're
Hmm.
energy beings, and that's what we're seeing.
What do you think Ezekiel's wheel within a wheel was?
You know what? That's actually one of the things I'm talking. I have two books I'm working on. Actually, we'll come down. Let me just list everything real quick. I just started ECG, which is free Christian comics, so everyone can share. And we have got a lot more coming. We're also on Facebook. You can look up ECG or Evangelical Comic Gallery. You can share it. The first comic is called "What Is a Perfect Christian,"
Hmm.
right? Or "The Perfect Christian." Then we have Syria, which again is our investigation. We got a lot of material we're about to dump on there in the next coming weeks. We're going to have like an explanation of how the world actually works. We're going to get into how was the Bible formed? Is Jesus a copy? That kind of stuff. Like we're going to be answering a lot of questions all at once. But I'm also working on two very short books that'll be coming out, and I'll let you know when they're available. One of them is about the monsters of the Bible, but the other one is literally starting with Ezekiel's wheel. And I say that because it is the one question I get all the time, right? Everyone's like, oh, you mean the UFOs in the Bible? You mean like Ezekiel's wheel? Ezekiel's wheel is the most focused on by UFOs. But the thing is, if you really look at the text, in order to get this weird quadcopter that everyone, I forget the guy's name who wrote that book. Um, anyway,
It
the
looks like a
engineer who created
gyroscope
this
to
weird
me.
there was a book that was written late 70s. Give me 2 seconds. I will pull it up
Hmm.
so I can show it to you. Anyway, he created this weird quadcopter, right? And it was his thought that this is it's a UFO with propellers. Here's my problem: the wheel within a wheel is like 2-3 words of one verse. The entire chapter is dedicated to the description of what he saw. In order to get to this weird looking UFO thing that he designed, you have to omit literally 60% of the text, right? Everyone focuses on the one thing that says wheel within a wheel. And it's, let me see if I think I've got it right here. Oh, come on. YouTube's that's Moses. That's not it. That's not it. Oh, there it is. Ezekiel, Spaceships of Ezekiel. See if you can see that or not.
Yeah, I
I'm
see that.
sorry.
Yeah, it,
Yeah,
it, it looks
yeah.
like a gyroscope to me.
Yeah, exactly. So
Hmm.
he Joseph Blumrich writes this book in the 70s, and he designs this, and he's like, "This is it," and he calls it Ezekiel's wheel, right? If you really go line for line through that text, there is no way you get a spacecraft out of this, right?
Hmm.
The wheels are literally the wheels on the throne. What you have is him describing can't be considered a UFO. He's literally talking about how the sky opens up, right? He sees flames and lightning, and he sees these 4 angels, and he describes them as, or, the 4 cherubs, as having arms with hands. He can, these aren't propellers; these are wings. They are, and they're upholding. And he talks about how the firmament is the sky itself that they're holding up. The wheels are beside them. God's throne is depicted as having wheels. It moves. And this goes and again, he describes the person, right, of God on the chair. Like, he's seeing everything. And you have to omit easily 60% of that text to get just this wheel, to get just this UFO concept. And it's one of what I call the ancient astronaut theory deceptions, right? They'll go back and they'll say, hey, look at this thing. Doesn't this look completely alien? How could they know this? And what they've done is they've taken a picture of Mary, of the Annunciation, right? And they show you this weird-looking spinning wheel in the sky with a laser beam shooting down. Well, what they've done is they've taken a photo out of focus, because if you look closely at it, it's actually, they're angels. They're clear, like, this isn't a UFO. They are deliberately lying to you to get this UFO look. And this happens on and on throughout art history. It's like, we know what these things are. Like, when they show you those pictures of the crucifixion, and it's like, well, here are these 2 men in UFOs flying by.
Right.
No, it's not. It's the sun and the moon. We know that because the artist told us who they were. In the Middle Ages, right? I mean, they considered the sun and the moon to be portrayed in the narrative of Jesus' crucifixion.
But there are ancient lithographs or paintings that look like there's UFOs in the background.
Some of them do, absolutely, but a lot of them aren't. The photographs are actually taken in such a way so that they are obscured, so that you don't see the glory of God. That's what they were depicting, right? The artist told us what they were depicting. This is not a new thing. There are a few things that look very much like spaceships in artwork, but here's the thing: each culture comes at it from their own perspective. And yes, I do think that some of these cultures, the ancient ones, particularly the pagan ones, right? They're practicing blood rituals, human sacrifice. They absolutely saw things that we could say were UFOs because they were visited by these creatures because they are demons. These are the ancient gods. They need that blood, that human sacrifice, because that's what gives them power. It is absolutely there's absolutely no question that in the 70s, when China and the United States and Europe, both, or all three of us, made abortion legal, that every year since then, UFO sightings have doubled. From the mid-70s, from the institution of China's two-child policy and Roe v. Wade in the U.S. and in Europe doing their stuff, no one has a final number of how many children have been killed. But we know the lowest estimates are about 500 million. The more liberal estimates are between 1.1 and 1.5 billion. And again, we don't know. But it's somewhere between 500 million and a billion. I think that's the safest number.
Do you think that these abortions are opening portals?
I think I don't think it's necessarily that they open portals in a fantasy movie kind of way, where it's like, here's Doctor Strange opening a portal and it's spinning and these little creatures come crawling out. In the Old Testament, you had, if you found a body right out there in the middle of nowhere, the city that was nearest to it, all of the elders had to come out there and they had a ritual they had to perform to beg God's forgiveness in case he had been murdered. God hates the spilling of innocent blood. Because, and he tells us specifically, again, why they had to do it. Because if they didn't do it, his disfavor would fall on the city, right? You had to clean it up. You had to make certain that you stood in the gap. What we are doing is bringing God's disfavor upon ourselves and upon the whole world. Where God's disfavor is, his spirit isn't. And where his spirit isn't, that's when the demonic forces can gain power. They are attracted to it. It gives them room to operate within their realm. I don't think that the fact that the church for the last 150 years has lost sight of what the giants were, has stopped doing the simple practices that we used to do, right? As far as like anointing our house, putting the 10 Commandments up over our doors, praying over our houses. We saw all that. Us modern Christians see it all as superstition. Over the last 150 years, we've rejected all of the things that our ancestors used to do, the Christians used to do all the time. And we've made a weaker church for it. And as the church has gotten weaker, the supernatural has gotten stronger. And I don't think that's a coincidence.
In my
And I
ranting,
would argue that again, abortion absolutely ties into that.
yeah,
Yes.
in my ranting points, I was talking about the several states have passed strong anti-abortion
Yes.
laws. I mean, heartbeat laws is what they call them now. As I was saying, that the certain segment of the United States population, the liberal part, believes in their mind that everybody believes that abortion is fine, and they've got it framed as this
Right.
woman's right. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I mean, of course, it seemed like out of nowhere, as soon as Democrats got into the Congress, all these states started passing live birth abortion bills, all kinds of sick stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But now a bunch of states are fighting back. Now, isn't that kind of show that there's a major battle? Is that a good sign that the
Yeah.
forces of good are battling back and perhaps we can win?
Yes, no, this is absolutely a supernatural battle that's happening right now. In fact, I would say you kind of have to have a larger supernatural view of the world, right, for any of this to make sense. Why do Democrats? I mean, they treat abortion as sacrosanct. For a group of people who are so dedicated to atheism and the rejection of religion, they practice the religion of abortion. Why? Because that's their master. If you're not in Christ, then you are absolutely a tool of Satan. There is no middle ground there. They react as if this is a sacrament to them, and I think that's because that is what Satan feeds off of. That's what his demons are feeding off of.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he needs to bring God's wrath on us.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why they worship it, whether they admit it or not.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, all of this has a very spiritual component, and I think also, I'll be honest here, I didn't vote for Trump. I voted for Evan McMullen or McMillan, but again, I didn't do it because I live in Texas. I knew Trump was going to win. I wanted to say, look, I want a conservative. That having been said, I'm having a great time with Trump as president. In the last 2 weeks, we've got Democrats to tell us that taxes are bad and to promote abstinence. That's a win for me. So I mean, and I think the reason is God chose Trump. I think we've seen enough evidence that God wanted Trump to be president, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why? Not because he was the most Christian, not because he was the some perfect person who was going to lead us into. It's because he had balls to do the right thing, and he's doing it. He had the balls that nobody else. Yes, I did. That nobody else was willing to do. Show me. I mean, think about it. Show me any of the pastors who've made stands like that.
No,
that he did.
there isn't any. There's none on the national scale, man. I just saw something the other day. They were chasing down Kenneth Copeland and saying, why do you need a $50 million airplane? And it was funny too because they showed a clip just before they got to that part. They showed him a clip of saying there's a bunch of demons in a congregation that don't want him to do it, and then the interviewer asked him, "Did you say that people were demons?" And he's like, he just manifested a demon. And said, "Don't you ever say that? I never said that." Of course, they just showed the video that he did, but but they're not saying anything about this war that's out here or how to win or how to defeat darkness. It's all about prosperity. Do we have any major voices out there? And it's strange, like you said. It seems that Trump has been kind of put in that place, and that maybe have given the states the balls to write those heartbeat bills.
Oh, that's exactly what's going on, right? Trump gets in there, he starts putting the right people in place, and the spirit. And again, every time people come against Trump, everything spins right back on them, right? This is Haman. No, Haman. This is the I forget the guy's name in the story of Esther, but the bad guy who builds the gallows for Haman. He ends up hanging on them. That is exactly what's happening with Trump. Every time somebody comes against him, the same whatever they're coming against him with gets spun right back on them. That's God. That's not him. He's not smart enough to pull it off. No human is, but God is. God is fighting back for us because we, as a nation, have largely been good, and we've never received our blessing for all the good things that we've done. I think that is this last thing. But I think he's opening up a chance for us in the church to get out there and be the church. I think that's the biggest problem this country has had, is the church stopped being the church 100 years ago. Maybe even more than, maybe 150 years ago, really around the Civil War. In the South, I mean, let's get real here for a second. In the South, many of the pastors of what we call the Southern Baptist Convention 150 years ago, they changed doctrine. They changed their theology to accommodate slavery. And when they broke away, they flat out said, "Hey, the United States was founded on this idea that all men were created equal, and we know from science that, and through Darwinian evolution, that's not the case." There was a huge corruption of the church in the South around the Civil War because the church became political. This country was created because Christians stood up and said, "This is what's right. This is what God wants," and they called the people to holiness and to justice, and they did it. And then at some point, the church became a political entity, and they traded the power of the Holy Spirit for the power of politics. And in doing so, we've abandoned our actual strength, which is in the Holy Spirit. So you have the church to the south that just starts rejecting good theology to accommodate the people who are giving them cash, and that's what that was about. The plantation owners kept giving them cash. They wanted the big churches, just like the Catholic Church was going to sell you an indulgence, so they could get their big cathedrals. That happened in the South, but also happened in the North. They started loving science too. They're the ones who led this whole way for liberal doctrine. You look at the 1800s, late 1800s in New York. Mormonism comes out of there. The Oneidians come out of there. Several groups come out of there. What's going on in New York that you have multiple cults coming out at the same time? This is all supernatural. And the church at one point gave up its supernatural power for political power. And we are paying the cost now. But what's happening under Trump is that the church is the real church, not the political church. The church, us people, are rising up. We're saying no. We want the real thing. We want holiness. We're going to fight back. And it's the people who are doing it. And it's you're seeing again. That's why you're seeing it. It's a move of God against this false church that has told Christians for the last 100 years that they're fighting for us. And God's like, I'm going to give you somebody who actually will. Is he a good Christian? Nope. Bad Christian. But Kim Clement prophesied that he wouldn't be a praying president going in. He never used the name Trump, but he said his color was gold, and that he'd have hot blood. And Kim Clement said he would go in not being a praying president, but he'll leave a praying president. And we're seeing that Trump is changing. He's becoming he is absolutely becoming a praying person. And we're seeing that, and I think we're seeing it every day. This is a move of God. This is a time for the individuals within the church to rise up and really make a move.
Sounds like you're suggesting that the main church has lost the salt. He said if the salt has lost its savor, it seems like the church has kind of lost its savor, but maybe getting it back.
Exactly. That's exactly it. You can't serve God. You can't serve God and money. And I don't care which denomination you're in. Those churches gave it up for money a long time ago. Let me take a step back. ECG, the Evangelical Comic Gallery that I created, on it, I'm flat out saying that you can donate to it in the About section, but I am not a 501c3. The reason I'm not a 501c3 is because it limits your ability to speak. If you want to be able to write off your taxes, you have to say what they want you to say. I won't. If I'm going to talk about about the evils of homosexuality or why transgenderism is bad, if I feel that that's the message God gave me, and He has, and I'll get to it in a little bit because I got a few more stories I got to tell first. But no, I'm going to say it. I'm going to tell you. By the way, politics. Here's how a Christian should vote. Here's what a Christian should be voting for. Not necessarily the person, but I'm going to talk about politics with my stuff. I'm not going to hold back. I don't believe the government has the right to hold me back. But to make certain there's no problems, I'm going to do it and say, I'm going to pay my taxes. Right? I'm not about to sacrifice anything God has given me to say for money. But what has every church, and again, I say this not judging, but I'm just stating the fact. If you are a church that is a 501c3, you can't say certain things and retain your tax status. Anyone who can tell you what not to say is your master.
Oh,
that's it. If you can tell me what to say and what not to say,
Mm-hmm.
you're my master. Now, if the government's the master and the one and they're telling you can't say this, then there's no room for Jesus as the head of your church, is there?
Mm. Because you just put the
I mean,
status
like I said, I'm
ahead.
not going to judge anyone. I'm just saying, look, this is what I found. This is why I'm doing things my way. All I can do is point to the Bible. Bible says you can't serve God and man. You
Mm-hmm.
can't serve God and money. You just can't do it. So fine, I'm not going to. But I can't help but notice how bad things got since the '60s when LBJ gets in there in order to shut up a bunch of Texas preachers who are saying, guys, LBJ is not who you think he is, right?
Mm-hmm.
They were calling him out. He passes the laws that says, oh, if you're a church and you want to change your tax status, you can't preach, you can't talk about politics. Again, the second from there, all hell breaks loose. Why? Well, because we can't talk about the things that matter anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, you can walk into any major denomination and look them and listen to them and talk to the pastors, and every pastor will say, well, I'd like to talk about this, but I'm worried that it'll bring that people will leave or people will start giving.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
Because they have those big buildings they got to pay for.
All right.
And again, I'm not against the big buildings, but I'm just saying there's a lot of people out there who are hurting because our churches have not done what they needed to do, not what they were called to do. And Trump's given a bunch of people a lot of spine. Now we have pastors rising up saying, you know what, I'm going to talk about politics. You can't tell me what not to do. I should have tax abated status because I'm a church, not because you tell me what to say and what not to say. This is all happening at the same time because I think this is the move to reclaim the church's gumption, to reclaim the power of the Holy Spirit, and not say, oh, government, please, can you pass these laws to make people like us?
So, how do you see this abortion battle playing out? Though, obviously it's going to get nastier at some point. Do you see that there's possibility of victory down the road? A lot of people are suggesting that the Supreme Court may take it up again and eliminate Roe v. Wade.
You know, I'm not a prophet. I'm not. I mean, and I can honestly see it going a couple of different ways. And so I guess the question becomes, where are we as a society? How are we Christians? Are we going to pray about this? Right? And what is God's plan? Like I said, I don't try to be a prophet. I know I've written, a lot of people say, well, you've wrote a bunch of prophetic books. Well, that's all I'm doing is relaying and translating what God's already written, right? With my books. I didn't try and come up with anything new. I was just writing what God had put in his word and in the stars. So, I mean, I can see it going a bunch of different ways. I'm just saying, you know what, maybe we all as Christians need to be praying about this a lot harder than we are.
There are those out there that say things like Bigfoot and Dogman and various things. If they're not, they say if it's not in the Bible, then it's not true. Of course, we could always say, well, there's not airplanes in there either, but they are true. Is there any of those creatures that disprove the Bible?
No. Now, a lot of people would like to say otherwise, but again, koalas aren't in the Bible either, right? I mean, we can run down a whole list of animals that aren't in the Bible. Doesn't mean the Bible isn't true. In fact, one of the arguments you can make is, well, why didn't God tell us specifically that the Earth is the third planet from the sun and that we're spinning around in space? Like, why didn't He tell us? When did He give us all this knowledge? The simple fact of the matter is, we're supposed to discover a lot of this on our own, right? We, one of the main sins of the Watchers was giving us knowledge we weren't supposed to have. We were supposed to earn it ourselves. Personal opinion. I won't die on this hill. I think that the reason the tree of knowledge of good and evil was there was not just to give us the opportunity to make that decision, which it was. I think we were supposed to eat it at a particular time. I think we were supposed to grow as a species, learn, gain knowledge. Again, it is the honor of the king to uncover the truth. Scripture tells us we were supposed to learn, grow, experiment. God wanted us to grow into this world, into this reality. I would even argue God did want us to go to the stars. Had we not sinned, we would have grown and left and we would have explored the universe. The universe is vast for us. This was our playground. This is the universe we were supposed to have authority over,
Mm-hmm.
and we were to grow into it. And so we were supposed to learn it. We didn't. Well, God's still not going to give us the knowledge we're supposed to gain ourselves. The
Mm-hmm.
Bible is about His relationship with us. What do we need to do to be right with Him? That's the focus of the Bible. Now, He tells us stories, and we get history through it, right? So He can show us how He loves us. So He can show us what He's doing, so we can understand Him. That's the reason the Bible exists, not to give us science.
Yeah.
Although there is some stuff in there that gives us some really interesting hints. So for me, do these animals prove or disprove anything? No. I will say though, I think Leviathan and Behemoth, the fiery flying seraphim that's mentioned in Isaiah,
Mm-hmm.
those are all dinosaurs. I think that's evidence of the existence of dinosaurs into very recent periods, into even today. Again, the fiery flying seraph, which again we'll deal with all three of those in my book on monsters of the Bible. That's a pterodactyl. Those are pterosaurs.
Mm-hmm.
They are bioluminescent. We see them literally all over the world, and have for years. The Europeans called them wyverns. They're a type of dragon. Herodotus called them dragons. We've had accounts of these creatures all over the place. So I would argue that yes, the Bible actually does talk about some three rather exotic animals, and those animals are evidence of creation, not evolution. Let me rephrase this: not the Darwinian evolution that we're fed.
Where it says that Noah was found perfect in his generations, it indicates that the entire earth was corrupt. And I would think that the giants and these human-animal hybrids, I posit that they existed. Is it possible that some of these creatures pre-flood went in the earth and are there to this day to escape the flood?
That's possible. You know what? At this point, I hold very few things as not possible. So, if someone were to tell me that happened, I'd believe it. As far if we have evidence of it, sure.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see a problem with that.
Mm-hmm.
I would argue maybe that that what's actually happening is the earth was destroyed, the animals were destroyed, the creatures were destroyed. What we're seeing are remnants of things that were created post-flood.
Mm-hmm.
That what you get with Nimrod and the Tower of Babel is a recreation of the Nephilim. But they go into, and I think we do have some spurts here and there where they're popularized and they try and regain their power, but they're driven away. So they never become as powerful as they were. However, I won't say that at least aspects of Hollow Earth are impossible. But at the same time, I will say I don't have the evidence to say yay or nay. So I try to only work with what I can prove and what I can show. Mm. So,
yeah,
I hope that's not a non-answer, but it just, unfortunately, as far as Hollow Earth and some of that, I'm open to the possibility. I just need a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, yes if some of those hybrids and Crimea creatures did go down there, I think they've got some Nazis down there and possibly some gray aliens. So there could be battles taking place in Earth. That sounds like a good book right there now.
It really does. It's one of those things where, and again, how much of this is dimensional too, right?
All right.
This is one of those things that we often don't take into account. Our reality has higher and lower strata. The dead in the Old Testament, and I would argue the damned still do today, went into the earth, right? This wasn't necessarily a dimensional concept. Like, yes, there was another dimension, but like they literally went within the earth. Hell or the land of the dead or Sheol, however you want to call it. Mm. I use the metaphor of Chili's, right? You go to Chili's, there's a non-smoking section, a smoking section, and then you have the bar. Well, when you died pre-Jesus, if you were righteous, you went to the non-smoking section. If you were, someone who, maybe was not as good, you went, right. You weren't right with God, you went to the smoking section. Right. And then within the smoking section, you had the bar. That's where the watchers are kept. That's Tartarus that Peter talks about. Okay. And of course, that's why when Jesus said, he went to Sheol, he went to the dead, he proclaimed himself to the spirits in Sheol. He was preaching himself to the Old Testament saints. He brings them out. And they go to heaven, and then that's why we can go to heaven now. But that still leaves this whole cavernous area, dimensionally speaking perhaps, of where the damned and the angels are, right? The Tartars, that's where they're chained. I have no doubt that some creatures have access to that. Again, maybe that's where everyone's going. Maybe that's what people are seeing when they take these DMT trips and they're seeing the city that's being built. Maybe that's where all this is happening. Again, maybe that's happening in the land of the dead. Maybe there's another pocket dimension somewhere where the evil angels are working and they're operating, and that's where they're staging their stuff, and that's what people see when they go into these DMT trips. And maybe that's where those creatures are going, right? Maybe that's where they're coming from. Maybe they're building up over here the material stuff, but they take them over there to hide them from us, and then they're just waiting the time where they can come back over, or maybe at the end, maybe midway through the tribulation, and that's what's causing all this havoc.
What is the ultimate plans of the fallen angels? Do they have an end game?
Personally, I think the end game is the same thing as day one. They think they can beat God. I think that's what this all comes down to. It is as simple as that. They are still stupid enough to think they can pull that off. And so in doing so, they are preparing a particular way. I think their original concept was to prevent Jesus from being born, right? That's why you have the corruption of, first, even the corruption of Adam and Eve in the first place. Like, Satan, why did Satan go and get and have anything to do with us to begin with? It makes no sense. None of it makes sense unless you realize they knew what the plan of God was. God created heaven, created us to have a child. He wanted to have Jesus. That was always the plan. Satan thought he could screw it up by having a sin, because he knows, well, God can't be where sin is. If they're sinning, then we're home free. So I think he did that to derail the plan, the plan of God. And God's like, nope. In fact, it's back on track. In fact, it's more on track than you realize, because we have to remember, Jesus is the Lamb slain from the foundation of the earth. This was always the plan. Satan doesn't realize that. He thinks he can win. So maybe he has a conversation with those 200 watchers. They come down. They start, corrupting the human genome, thinking, well, if we have nothing but non-humans on Earth, boom, Jesus can't come either. Well, that doesn't work out. So what does he do? He puts the giants back in the land, and they're there waiting for the Jews when they show up, but that doesn't work. So Jesus comes and goes, and he's waiting. He's going to come back. So what's he doing? He is trying to he tries to destroy the Jews. That doesn't work. So he's building his army. That's what the Battle of Armageddon is. I think Satan thinks he can build a non-human army, have some human foot soldiers, have some Nephilim soldiers, have some advanced technology that humans wouldn't have had any other way, and we're going to have this big battle royal. And I still think he believes he can win. That Jesus is going to show up and he's going to be like, all right, let's use our in fact, I'm really interested in next week's episode, these non-projectile weapons. Let's use these high-energy weapons, and we'll have our Nephilim soldiers, and we can actually win this battle and keep Jesus from coming back and establishing himself as king. Satan is trying to stay out of hell. We're really the lake of fire. And I think that everything that he's doing is trying to create an army that can face off against Jesus one way or another. That's what the demons are for. That's what the Nephilim are for. And again, I think that these, what we call gray aliens, are a manifestation of those Nephilim. Some people have speculated that they're sort of like humanoid robot bodies or organic robot bodies. Maybe the genetic template comes from what I would call the Emperor style or the Emperor class of Nephilim, because they have many similarities. And then what a demon is just inhabiting this body. It's like an encounter suit, right? It's just a physical thing that they can hop into and move around. There seems to be some evidence that demons can inhabit computers if they're sophisticated enough.
Do you think that demons can inhabit some of these new sex robots that are out there?
I don't know why they'd want to, but I think that they could inhabit just about anything. I mean, they seem to have... The real question is, can they manipulate them to make them do what they want? That's where things get weird, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think that
That's
right
weird.
now our mechanical women of the night. I was trying to come up with a clever way of saying that, but I don't think these sex bots really are sophisticated enough for the demons to operate like a suit, right? Like demon. The reason, again, a common misconception: a demon is not a fallen angel. A demon is the spirit of a dead Nephilim. The fallen angels don't need to inhabit anything. They're powerful enough to manifest as a being on their own. They don't need it. That's why you have a legion of demons that'll inhabit a human body, or they'll go into a pig. They're tortured when they're not, right? They hunger, they thirst. That's what they were punished for. They were punished for being cannibals, right? In pre-flood, that's why, and so their spirits are wandering. They hate humanity to begin with, but they're tortured by hunger and thirst and a lack of sensation. Human beings have physical bodies. When we can't feel things, it drives us insane. That's what they're experiencing. That's why when you see someone who's possessed, they'll cut themselves, they'll hurt themselves because it's the sensation that the demons are wanting to feel. So again, I think so. That's why they'll inhabit animals and they'll inhabit people. But I think they can. I think some of these grays, again, maybe they're not encounter suits. Maybe they are an organism that is created. But I still think they're connected to those Emperor Nephilim. But if they can inhabit those as some sort of organic robot, I have no doubt that a sophisticated enough robot they would inhabit, because there would be enough information for them to control and process that would be worth their time, right? But right now, I don't think our mechanical mistresses got it. Mechanical mistresses, that's what we can use.
Okay.
There we are. That's a book right there.
I like it.
But I don't think our mechanical mistresses are sophisticated enough for them to care about right now, just personally speaking. But again, personal opinion, I have no evidence one way or the other.
I mean, I would say mechanical whore dogs. But this war you're talking about, with the Nephilim and tech and maybe some human foot soldiers, aren't they going to make the same mistake they did where I know the Bible says, had they known they crucified the Son of God, they never would have done it. Aren't they making the same mistake? Is it pride that is causing them to think that they can do it again with the better tech?
Pride is the only sin that matters, because it's the one thing that makes us sin, right? In fact, let's go back to Adam and Eve, right? We think, the tree was the knowledge of good and evil. It's knowing good from evil that made them sin. No, it's not that they were saying, this is the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And it's the knowing what's good from bad that was the problem. We have to understand that, again, perfection, good, evil, these are all utilitarian in the views of God, right? If I hand you a glass goblet, and I'm like, this is what you drink your wine out of, or this is what you drink beer out of, or whatever it is you want to drink, then you start using it as a hammer, right? We have a problem. I made this glass, drinking vessel, and you're smashing it in, trying to put a table back together. Well, it's not going to work that way, right? That glass is going to shatter and break apart and hurt yourself. And what we have is a table that's not put together. You're going to be all cut up, and that vessel is broken. That's sin. Sin is ascribing good or evil when you don't have the right to do it. God determined the use and purpose of everything on this earth and in our reality. Sin is saying, you're wrong, God. I'm going to determine what I use that for. And so in the same way is that pride of life. It's that I'm going to determine what's right or wrong. And if I'm going to have that pride, then I'm not going to learn. People who are prideful don't ever learn, and you can't reject that pride unless you're within Christ. So I think, yeah, absolutely. They're deluded, and they're deluded because of their pride. They think that they can be them. Again, how often do we hear this from our favorite Democrats? It's my body, my choice.
Right.
I get to determine what I want to do with it.
A lot of eyes there.
Yeah, a lot of eyes, and it's the entire
I shall ascend into the high mountain. I shall sit on the throne as God. That's where that's coming from.
Exactly, and they're saying, again, you're transgender. Hi, you were born a female. Nope, I have decided that I am a man, or you were born a man. I have decided that I am a woman, or that again, there's a guy out there who thinks he was a man. He's now performed surgeries and tattoos and implants, and he believes himself to be a female dragon. Not only he's a transgender dragon, he named himself after Tiamat, the chaos dragon from of the Babylonians. So we're like, no, the Bible's like, there's male, there's female, there's animal, there's male, there's animal and there's human. There are dividing lines. It is sharp. It says this is what you are, and this is how things are to be used. And we're prideful, saying, no, I'm not what you made me. I won't use this the way you want me to use it. I won't do this thing. It's all pride, right? It tells us to do this thing. And I think at the end of the time, it's going to be the same pride that leads people to put on, to take DNA enhancing drugs and maybe take some sort of suit, and it's like, yeah, I'm gonna go shoot this laser beam at that guy in a flying horse.
Yeah, I do know that I do know this one. I do know this one tranny looking dude who said he's a woman. He won a bunch of, I think, wrestling awards in female wrestling. I think they actually took him away from him.
Yeah.
So that's good. Somebody pointed out, and I thought I read in one of the chats, I think there's one of the more classic haunted dolls. I think it's called Robert the Doll. There's several well-known haunted dolls, and I think the idea is if they can haunt dolls, then it sure should be easy to haunt a sex robot. But I guarantee you, they haunt those nutcrackers, man, with those gnarly teeth. Those dudes, man, if you wake up, if you got that around a Christmas tree, next day you're going to wind up with bite marks. It's just the way it is.
Well, I'm going to avoid the joke. But I've heard stories of troll dolls dancing, right? I think the question of what a demon can and cannot inhabit is they can do whatever they want, right? The question is, can they operate it effectively, right? So an inanimate object moving on its own, that doesn't surprise me. Every culture's talked about that. The question, though, with, like, say, the sex robot is, is it sophisticated enough for them to control it like a suit, right? And the thing is, I don't think that they're sophisticated enough for them to do what they want. Could they jack with them a little bit? Okay, that was probably the wrong word.
Wrong.
Could they manipulate them to make them say things and maybe like move over or turn whatever? Yeah, I think they could absolutely do that. But as far as like getting in and walking around and talking to people, I think the problem is the robots aren't sophisticated enough for that. In the future, however, and I mean by future, I mean within the next 5 years, I don't know that would necessarily be the case. And it may not be the sex robots. We have things that look like dogs, right? Or we have all kinds of different robots. I wouldn't be surprised if demons would be able to inhabit them and use them because they would be useful.
We had a guest one time on this program who said that he went to this house where a woman had collected dolls, and she said they were haunted. And he said he walked into the room, the dolls were actually hanging from the roof or something, and they all turned around and looked at him. So man,
that's when you burn the house down.
Yeah, a lot of hunters there.
Yeah,
a lot of hunters there.
You get the people out. You lock the doors and you burn that thing to the ground.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, man. This couple hours here is going real quick. Jason, any other topics? I think you mentioned that you want to talk about something for the end of the show. I don't know if there's.
We're just getting more into what ECG is specifically, but I'll be real quick about a couple things because you're right. We've been all over the place, and basically. Like I said, the Evangelical Comic Gallery, or ECG, what we're doing is we're creating comic books that you can share digitally, right? So you can find us on Facebook, you can friend us, you can share it through Facebook, or you can go online and you can download as a PDF the story, both in color or black and white, and you can even do color, black and white print copies, right? You can download them and print them off on your printer as long as you can do double-sided. But you can download the PDF, email it to somebody. The entire point of this is to get the word out there, like the old chick tracts, right? Get the word out there to people without the limitations of printing, right? I mean, now it's like everyone's got a cell phone, everyone's got a smartphone. You can ping it to somebody. It's like, hey, here, read this. This will tell you. Some of it's going to be educational, some of it's going to be ministerial. This particular, this first one, it's called the Perfect Christian. It's going on it's working on the concept of what makes can someone be perfect. It's something that changed my life a few years ago, understanding it. And I think we talked about this a little bit last time I was on, but it sort of walks you through that, right? What does the Bible consider to be perfect, and how can you be perfect? And I've noticed that this has helped a lot of people that I've spoken with. It's helped me. So it's the first one I'm putting out, but I'm going to put out a lot more. And so this goes back to the church, us as the individuals, church, big C, not an individual church rising up to make to really be Jesus to the world. This is a thing that will allow people to do it. It's just one resource to get out there and really push that. Series papers, again, over the next 2 weeks, we're going to be putting a lot out. That's going to talk about how the world actually works. What does the universe work? Because there's stuff your pastor has never told you about what the Bible actually says about a lot of things, and we're going to be talking about it. And it's going to be a resource because I'll be real honest, I came across a lot of flack from churches and other creationist groups who didn't want to deal with this kind of stuff, right? And so they're like, yeah, we completely believe that UFOs are going to be the religion of the 21st century, but we can't talk about it. What the heck?
Wow.
So Ceru is going to become an all points resource. If you want to talk to somebody about creationism, you want to talk to somebody about UFOs, cryptids, it's all going to be there. And we're going to be putting out weekly and bi-weekly articles with illustrations about cryptids and where do they fit? Are they supernatural or are they natural? And we'll be going over information as well, like what's the London Hammer? How does it fit into things? Why do we have footprints that are, with dinosaur footprints? Why does the mainstream media and academia, why do they reject it? It's all going to be there, and it's going to be continually popping up. So it's one of those things to keep checking track on.
Well, I'll tell you what, I love what you're doing, Jason, because when I put up that graphic there for the comics, I thought, Gen Con would be a perfect place for that. But framing the gospel, it sounds like what you're doing is apologetics wrapped in what people are searching for. On the internet, people are searching for Bigfoot, cryptids, UFOs, all that. And you have some tremendous explanations of these creatures, which engages somebody's attention while you carefully weave in there. I love that approach, man. It's new, it's relevant, and I think it should catch fire. Really, it's a new tool for people to use. It seems like to me.
Well, I that's what I'm hoping for, right? I think after a while, I had to admit my wife was right, because your wives are always right. My wife kept telling me, it's like, you're weird in the fact that I am weird, but you're unique in the fact that you seem to have this weird group of people that you've fallen in with, and very specific things about how certain things work. It's like, and no one else is doing this. And don't get me wrong, there are people out there who are talking about the Nephilim, right? They're blowing up Timothy Alberino, L.A. Marzulli. And there are people out there doing this. And so I definitely don't want to seem like I'm the only one. But you're right. We are going to be doing things a little differently. We're saying from the beginning, this is a Christian organization, right? We're going to tell you how to deal with evil. We're going to tell you, if you're seeing, if you're paralyzed in the middle of the night and you're seeing, shadow creatures, let me tell you how to get rid of them, because it's a simple way to get rid of them. If you're being plagued by UFOs and aliens, quote unquote, showing up to torture you in the middle of the night, there's a way to get rid of that too. And here's why: because you can understand these things through the scriptural method. The scripture tells us what these are. They may not look the way you anticipate them looking at, because our churches have done a very bad job of understanding and exploring the supernatural over the last 100 years. In fact, we've almost all given up the concept of what reality is to the atheist, right? We don't want to talk about this because we don't look like we're crazy. You're talking to people who believe the universe blew up 14 billion years ago, and then somehow that explosion led to monkeys and people, right? They're already crazy. This is as insane as it gets. The thing is, they're going to believe every crazy explanation that they're given, because it allows them to say, there is no God, I'm not accountable to him, I'm master of my own fate. And we need to be able to say, no, here's the evidence. You want to say they're UFOs? Here's the evidence that they're not UFOs. You want to say that evolution is true? Here's the evidence the evolution isn't true. And we get to see it every day through cryptozoology and the paranormal. But everyone's got a different walk. So again, not everyone has seen a Bigfoot. So, okay, well, hey, but you know what? Being a perfect Christian, that's something you can do. And something you were told you can't, right? We're all told nobody's perfect. We're all told, oh, I can't be perfect. The Bible says you can. The Bible says specifically, be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. There's a way to do that, but does anybody talk about that anymore? No, right? We've been, there's a lot going on. The church has abandoned a lot of people over the last century, and I think that we individually, and I'm just one person of a much larger church, the remnant is coming up to say, no, let's do what the Holy Spirit wants us to do. Let's make that impact. Wow. And everyone watching us can make that impact, not just through my stuff. Go do your stuff, right? Each one of us is called to be something unique in the world. You don't have to put up a website. You can, do however you want. If you're seeing me do this, you're like, man, that sounds like a great idea. Good. Figure out what God's called you to do, and you go do it, because you have a calling. You have a role to play in this church. Your church job is not to go to a building on a Sunday and listen to somebody talk. Your role is to get out there and to serve and be Jesus to the world around you.
See, what I see the problem there kind of reminds me when they were on the boat, the disciples and Jesus were on the boat, and Jesus went walking on the water. The problem that I see there is only one guy went out with him.
Yeah.
The rest of them stayed in the boat. What you're saying is get out of the boat. He's going to be there with you.
Yeah. When he says call and come, go. You know, and I'm not saying that maybe it's not right now for you. Let Jesus talk to you about that. But get one-on-one with him. Let him tell you where you need to be, and you'll find where you need to be, and that's how you become perfect. Do the role you're supposed to fill. Like I said, if I make this glass, this glass cup, I'm like, here, drink with it, and you drink with it, you have perfected the cup. In the same way, we need to be willing to be the glass cup, or maybe we need to be a hammer, maybe we need to be a car. Whatever it is God wants us to be, we need to be that thing. This is just me being the thing he's called me to be. All I'm saying is let's all get out there and be those things.
Is there a website for the illustrated books?
Yes, it's ecomicgallery.com. And again, you can go to Facebook and type in Evangelical Comic Gallery. It'll pull up. So it's ecomicgallery.com. Or again, you can go to jarofpaint.com. I have a link there, and again, Ciru Papers is up. That's SIRU papers.com. You can find me on Facebook. I'm Jason McLean. Just hanging out, and I'll. In fact, once we're done, I'll shoot you an email with, or I'll text you all of the links to all the different websites. You can contact me anytime. You can order art from me through Jar of Paint, or if someone's out there like, I want to donate to them. Like I said, I'm not a 501c3, but my PayPal stuff is on Jar of Paint, and it's also on Evangelical Comic Gallery or ecomicgallery.com. All
right. Wow. It was great to have you back in. This time just flew past. Jason, can we have you back on the program again sometime?
Hey, give me a call. I'm usually free most Saturday nights because I'm a terribly boring person. But like I said, and hopefully next time I'm on, we can be a little bit more direct and talk about one topic for a couple hours. Because I just feel like we're so scattershot over here. It's like we're talking about this and we're talking about that. I'm just worried that people aren't getting everything out of it.
No, see, what it is there's a lot of people watching with various interests, and we probably hit all their interests.
You know what? That's why you have the show. But we will, and again, I have two two small, very short books coming out hopefully next 2 weeks. And I'll shoot you a copy once they're ready. Maybe we can come back on and talk about those as well. All right,
we're going to do it. Jason McLean, I appreciate you coming on the show. We're going to have you back.
No problem, man. We'll talk to you later.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.